Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello, Oliver.
Is everything fine?
Yes, it is. Hey, Boyd.
Hello.
So, that's the perfect time to test our setup. Because we're not going to be streaming exactly our videos, we're going to be streaming something else. So I'm going to disappear and to become this instead. And I need probably to switch my video. Like that. Okay, now it's flipped. So can you see it properly? Can you read?
Backwards for me now.
Oh, it's backwards for you. Oh.
For me too.
I see. So it was, that was, I'm doing it again. Yeah.
Oh, now it's better.
Yes, it's backwards for me, but it doesn't matter.
Oh.
And then, Oliver, can you pen both of us?
Yeah, it takes a lot.
Is it possible to pen both of us?
Ah, yeah.
Okay.
I guess alternatively, we could just everyone turn off their videos for the two of us, and then I get in the gallery and see both of our. So that you can see both of our screens.
Microphone test.
I can hear you.
Thank you. It's not too loud.
A little bit. You're louder than. Don't know the name.
Oh, okay.
Can you turn it down a little bit?
Yes, I can control my gain.
But I think it's not a problem when you're the only one that speak. You talk.
Well, two of us speaking.
Ah, okay, then yeah. Then you have to.
So Boyd will be speaking, and then I be speaking.
Are you able to hear me?
Am I still loud?
Yeah, it's better.
How about now? Okay. I can maybe just adjust the volume there in the audio settings. Oh, I see. Okay. I am pretty loud indeed. Good.
And are you able to hear me?
You're
But it's not so clear.
It's not very clear. Okay.
It's a little different.
Is this any better?
What is the next biggest challenge that remains? What problems have been solved and which remain? What problems have been solved and which remain?
Did you hear a computer speaking? Perfect.
Is my audio still having issues?
So
Are you able to hear me okay, Piotr? Is it still distorted?
Hello, Irene. Do you want also to test your presentation or something, the sound?
Yeah, sure. I can try to share my screen.
Mm-hmm. The sound is well. I can hear you very clear.
Okay, great.
Just.
Can you see it?
Yes, it starts. Mm-hmm. Do you have any videos or sound in your presentation?
No, it's a pretty simple presentation.
Ah, great. Then it's fine. Yeah.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Boyd, may I ask if we can try your sound on your video, on your slides?
Yes. I just want to make sure
So it was
you
a
are
slide.
able to hear me okay.
It's okay. Oh, now your voice is gone, Boyd. Now it's gone. Now it's back.
Okay. Well, that's fun. Dim audio.
So to be this one. Yeah, here we don't see the sound of the slides.
You're not hearing that.
Hello, everybody. Just
hello.
I don't hear that video.
Just let me check, please. So Piotr is there, and also Kory Mathewson. He's there.
It's all right.
Okay.
Now it works, Boyd. Thanks. Hello, Simon. So today it's Boyd and I, Piotr, who are speaking. Kory is sleeping because it's 5 a.m. for him.
Okay, perfect. So
We tried to wake him up, but he didn't answer.
Okay.
Yes, he's in Montreal. Yes, I tried to pull the sheets, pour some water, but no, he refused.
Okay, that's perfect. And
Gunter.
Irene as well is there as well.
Yes, hi, everyone.
Yeah. Hello. Could you just correct me if I'm wrong? How do you spell your last name, please?
Well, actually, the pronunciation of my first name is Irene.
Oui, Irene.
And yeah, and my surnames are Alcubilla Troughton.
Okay, perfect. And just to check for everybody, because we have 1 hour, that would mean that we have like 25 minutes for each presentation and maybe 5 minutes for a couple of short questions. Is that okay for everybody?
I think we're going to try to err on the side of shorter with more.
Yeah, you can be shorter there, so we would have more time for questions. Okay.
Our
Okay.
goal anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, we assumed that since some panel sessions have 3 presentations, it will be fair that everyone conforms to about 15 minutes.
Yeah, that would for the panels with 3 presenters, it's like that. But if we have 2 papers, you would have a little bit more time. But today we have more time for questions. That's perfect.
The truth is, we want to hear more of you.
Yes, exactly.
What's the order of the presentation?
The order, no, but normally we would start with your paper, and then Irina would be second. That's okay for you.
Sure. Yeah.
But that's in the program. It's like that, so maybe we should keep it that way.
Boyd, can you adjust my green screen?
Right. I don't.
Okay, maybe if I just... No, it's fine. I fixed it with lights. I should have done it myself.
How was the keynote? I got started late, so I didn't.
And Oliver, so you can mute everybody during the talks and then open up the mics for the question.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
But I think the most of the people, they enjoy welcoming anyway muted.
Okay, well, it's 11:15. Should we start? Yes. Okay. So, well, some people are still joining. Okay, so hello everybody. So for this panel 3, donc with 2 papers on human robotic interaction on the theater stage with I think a special focus on improvisation. We will see that during the 2 talks. So we will start with the first paper. Donc for the first paper we have Boyd Branch, donc a digital arts and performance specialist, donc who working at Improvisational Media and Performance Lab in London. And we have Piotr Mirowski, donc a research scientist at DeepMind, and also the co-founder of AI-enabled theater companies, Improbotics and Human Machine. So I think we will talk a little bit about that as well. And well, let's start with this paper with the intriguing title, Hell is Other People's Robots. Please, Piotr and
thank you.
Boyd.
probably easiest I guess if you pin both my screen and Piotr's screen. That makes sense. Maybe if Oliver, are you able to just pin my screen and Piotr's screen?
It's already pinned.
I guess not for. I guess. Can you guys see our background okay?
On the background, you should see how is other people's robots and two clowns.
Wait a minute. All right. So, hello, I'm Boyd Branch. Super excited to be here with all of you, friends and the group I see. I am a lecturer at Coventry University, and I run the Computational Media and Performance Lab, which is this umbrella for looking at how improvisation can inform building technology and creating experiences that allow for better social interaction. And I'm here with Piotr Mirowski.
Hello, I'm Piotr Nyovsky. So, as I've been introduced, I am a research scientist in artificial intelligence. I work at an AI research lab, DeepMind, and on problems involving navigation, weather forecasting, totally disconnected from theater. So, and I have a computer science background, but at the same time, I'm also passionate about theater and improv. Took some acting training, and 5 years ago, I started with Kory Mathewson and later with Boyd Branch, an AI improvised theater comedy and theater troupe called Improbotics. So in Improbotics, we have been staging robots on the stage in the context of improvised theater and comedy. And since 2016, we have produced and performed in over 100 of improv shows, in small comedy pubs, at international fringe theater festivals, in art museums, at technology and creative AI conferences, and always in front of a live audience. Sometimes there were 3 people in the audience, sometimes 3,000. Doing so, we subjected ourselves and audiences to hell. Why?
And so we developed this chatbot for co-creating theater with a robot called Alex, and for German and we and Kory, Mathewson, and Piotr came later, which is currently based on GPT-3. Alex is essentially a robot that tracks plot, story, and character arcs to generate contextual images that we engage in dialogue with. And so today we wanted to talk about some things that we kind of discovered along the way of working with robots that wasn't necessarily by design, but has come to inform some of our larger practice. It's kind of encourage us to reconsider a few notions. In particular, this question of autonomy, and if it is a central condition for human objects on stage.
Yeah, so allow me to interject, Boyd, because we are doing a dialogue, essentially. That translates to me in the following way. So improvisational theater actors have to immediately respond to whatever is going on the stage and to adapt to constantly changing circumstances. And I would like to quote Brian McGurko, who said that improvisers need to display dynamic problem solving in real time. For many researchers in computational creativity, my understanding is that they believe improv is the ultimate test of intelligence. So I guess that's how I see autonomy.
And so what we're going to be talking about today is kind of what economy looks like from a human perspective and potentially from a robot perspective, and if that can maybe help us better examine coexistence. It also led us to question about the utility of an anthropocentric gaze on technology, and to what degree the robot can be a stage partner.
Right. So actors and audiences that personify the robot to make it an equal stage partner. Yes, I got that.
We also began to wonder if coercion is a necessary outcome of adopting intelligent technology. As you'll elaborate on further, we discovered that rather than us controlling Alex, in many ways, we can consider Alex controlling us, which has led to some interesting questions about what that control, who's in control on stage, and what's the value of thinking about control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm always a little bit wary about the word coercion. I think it's because of my background in AI and trying to paint a rosy tinted picture of the utility of robots for humans. But yes, I have to say that in many cases, the robot ended up taking over the show with the consent of the human actors, who I guess are happy to do it.
And this is where Piotr and I might disagree a little bit about if one can give consent when dealing with robots, but we'll try to unpack that a little bit. Another question that came up is if we're participating in a revolution that decenters humans, we're thinking about this in the context of object-oriented ontology, is there a role for entertainment? And what does entertainment actually look like?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here I disagree with you. Indeed, as you said, I believe there is always a need and a room for entertainment. And I'm thinking of video games where humans are very happy to to engage in activities with machines and to be entertained by machines. Also, Boyd, I think someone put it in the chat that your mic volume was low.
Oh, thank you. I will try to adjust that while Piotr is talking next.
Right. So I think we need to say a little bit about what is going on here in this project. So at the heart of Alex, there is a chatbot, itself built on top of a language model. Statistical language models have been around since Claude Shannon's work on statistics of words in the English language. And what language models do is to estimate the likelihood of a word given a context, which can in turn be used to sample from this probability distribution to choose, that means generate, the most likely next word. By repeating this process, we can obtain full sequences, full sentences, sequences of characters that are statistically most likely to occur in the dataset. And the reason why we started doing this was because of the improv precept of always do the most obvious thing. Machine learning models are built by design to always do the most obvious thing if they are programmed with maximum likelihood in mind. Anyway, so we currently use language models that are trained using machine learning on very large corpora of text of the order of several billions of word tokens, covering millions of web pages, books, and film dialogue. The language models are neural networks with a very special architecture called transformers. And because of that specific neural network architecture and because of their size, they are able to generate text that reincorporates elements from the conditioning prompts, including misspellings or newly introduced words or special proper nouns and characters that were not even seen in the training dataset. So that means that those transformer neural network based language models can be at the same time very specific to the context, but also because of the wide size of the training dataset, highly diversified. And they can produce seemingly indistinguishable in appearance a text from that produced by humans. And so initially we started with recurrent neural networks, then we switched to GPT-2, and most recently we switched to GPT-3, to which we have access through the OpenAI API. Thank you, Boyd, for preempting the transition. I think at this point, we need to demonstrate how this works. So we had some slides as backup, but I would invite you to switch to the other screen where you can only see lines. So Simon, can you pin the screen where it says Piotr, he, him, London, and you only see your text. So you shouldn't basically see Boyd and me, but just the text. Well, I guess we need to start engaging in the dialogue. Boyd, is there something you want to ask to Alex?
Yeah. I'm curious, Alex, if autonomy is relevant for you.
So is there anything else?
Well.
Since you are, showing some of the examples.
I am very biased towards autonomy, but I think that it is important to note that autonomy is interesting because just like intelligence, it is dynamic and it is something that can be cultivated.
It's an interesting point, thinking about it in terms of its movement or its flexibility as a dynamic agent. I think maybe helps us begin to better parse out what autonomy's consequences really are. You're welcome, Piotr. That's a lot of lines.
I hate you, Boyd. Short sentences, please.
What about for future scenarios in the real world?
Well, I think that's the question about, what access do we have to the real world? Do you feel like you have access to the real world?
We are trying to help people think about how things work.
Fair enough, Alex.
Don't get too far away from the real world.
Well, we'll do our best, but there's a good tendency that we might fly a little bit off into esoteric theoretical land.
That's good.
Thank you, Boyd. And thank you, Alex. We had a demonstration of an interaction with Alex. And back to the slides, where you see both Boyd and me. Hello. You can see behind me a screen with which is the visual interface that is used by the operator in our show. So the operator keeps typing inputs coming from the scene in real time as they observe whatever is happening on the theater stage and whatever is said by the various actors on the stage. And then the chatbot keeps producing lines and the operator can pick them up. And so you can see, for instance, the one in blue that was selected is the one that was picked in response to a question, tell me, Alex, do you understand the meaning of Sartre's Hell is Other People? Anyway, coming back to the presentation itself, what did we do with that chatbot? So in its first inception, Alex was merely a disembodied voice, and the input was coming from the stage via speech recognition. And over the course of performances, we realized with Kory that using a chatbot as a stage partner forces us to think about the question of embodiment in order to find and to enable easier and more pleasing interaction with the human actors and with the audience. So we added a little robot in our show whose movements were triggered automatically from our custom software every time the robot received a line from the chatbot. And later on, we replaced the robot with human actors who would do exactly the same thing as the robot would do. They would get the lines from the chatbot via an earpiece, and then they would have the freedom of choice of choosing the timing and the delivery and the artistic interpretation of whatever the chatbot was producing. So we can watch this little excerpt of 1 minute.
Suggestion, could you please finish my sentence? Alex and I are going to the zoo. like that. I haven't been in ages. All right. Did you say you want to see the monkeys first or the tigers? If possible, could we go to the aquarium? It's my favourite bit.
Het is goed.
Okay.
It's all right.
Oh. I love that you're learning Dutch for me. So, I was really pleased that you wanted to see me again.
We are going to the zoo.
Well, we're already there. Can you not see? There's antelopes right there. Silly bugger. So, I actually wanted to talk to you about something. Our previous date I thought went really well.
It's nice.
Just nice. I mean, I kind of had a really good time, but you think it was just nice.
But this morning we were very sick.
Yeah,
We were very sick.
Yeah. Yes, that was a bit of a down note to the day, but at least we made it till the morning. Huh? I mean,
Please go away.
Thank you.
Finish my sentence.
Thank you, Boyd. There were, of course, many. So this illustrated the interaction with a robot itself. We didn't illustrate, for the sake of time, interactions where the actors are getting the lines and then saying them. And then, as we kept iterating on the types of interactions we can get with a robot on the stage, we thought about using the robot as narrator. So in this case, the operator keeps typing whatever is happening in the context of a scene while the performers are freely improvising a scene, and then interrupts the scene with a robot narrator coming in and essentially orienting the direction in which the scene, seemingly freely improvised by the actors, is taking place. So we posted here the transcript of one such scene where the suggestion was Pizza Hut, and in the previous prompt there was some situation happening with Brian and his date losing patience, and Alex came up with the chatbot, came with the following suggestion: the door opened and a burly man entered, followed by his wife. So instantly, the actors had to get out of the stage, and someone else walk in, pretending to be that burly man, and someone else joining. Oh, now I'm the wife. And so the scene continued, and I kept typing whatever's going on. The couple entered the pizzeria, and the man spoke with a heavy voice. And then Alex said that both had a crush on Brian. So suddenly, the love triangle emerged. And the scene had to take a new direction. There are many other modalities of interaction, and we have on this call Gunter LOESEL, who has tried, for instance, using chatbots in his own research work as psychoanalysts, or inform pop song singers on the stage. But anyway, I need to shut up and leave the stage for Boyd.
And so these different types of interactions have sort of led us to examine, as you said earlier, what's controlling the action on stage, and what are the consequences and implications of having a robot, in our case Alex, that's playing with us, and if autonomy is a special condition for humans on stage. So when we improvise with Alex, we're expected to follow the conventional guidelines of good improvisation, of accept and amplify all offers, saying yes and, trusting our instincts, and blurting our first thoughts. Above all, we're to make each other look good. And this formula ensures that the relationship between improvisers deepens, meaning it's created and shared, and stories develop. The formula works because of the way it hijacks our normal survival confronted with stress. Normally, the stress of uncertainty and perceived danger produces suspicious, defensive, and hypervigilant behavior in the service of restoring a kind of equilibrium. We try to eliminate danger by negating or withdrawing ourselves from the situation. So the improv structure itself actually trains improvisers to replace those isolating and defensive behaviors with trusting, cooperative, and creative behavior in the service of discovery. And this inversion of our instincts results in the need to expand the notion of reality. We're compelled to accept a new condition for meaning making. So using this formula, Alex only needs to make offers, whether they're appropriate or absurd sounding, in order to appear intelligent when talking to an improviser. And this is perhaps a special category for intelligence, understood here as a measure of meaning making. So when meaning emerges between objects, the burden of proof for intelligence actually lies with those objects who do not understand Alex. And so Alex does not simply appear intelligent by virtue of the skills of the human improviser. Instead, Alex actually increases general intelligence to the degree that performers and audiences widen the possible scope of meaning to accommodate what it offers. The challenge for Alex and its programmers then is not how to create better models of intelligence, but how to convince human intelligence to serve it.
So that makes me think about the following. When you say that the AI manages to convince human actors to serve it, you're being very optimistic about the capability of the AI and of its own autonomy. The AI doesn't know what the humans are saying at all, and because the operator needs to type it, that input, and it's just limited to whatever interpretation the operator has of the scene. And the operator certainly doesn't know, and the AI certainly doesn't know how to time its interjections. That's the role of the human actor, or the operator who clicks at the right time on a suggestion.
Those are all excellent points. I think when we begin to think about autonomy, it's not necessarily just the conscious choices that we're making that determines what's possible, but it's the conditions that Alex actually sets up that's already engaging us in a certain type of activity. We're already bound up in what Alex is offering.
Mm-hmm. And so building up on what I said, it brings the idea of a need of curation and control of that AI. The role of the operator is to input the actor's dialogue into the system, to let it generate multiple candidates, multiple lines, and then to select at the right time the relevant sentence from a limited set of choices. Once a sentence is selected, the system can either use text-to-speech, to voice for the audience to hear that sentence, or it can be sent via a headset, to the human actor, who we call cyborg, who then repeats and interprets it.
So at this level, we're dealing with curation as a very sort of how we think of it in a normal artistic sense. It's a human selecting the best of options. But in working with Alex, I've begun to think of it more as a sort of incorrigible kind of curation. One that's actually more connected to a coercion. So the operator essentially sets the possible in motion, and it sets the boundaries of the play. Alex is essentially presented ready at hand. It has a very simple interface on the front, but behind it is a lot of technology, thousands of lines of code, all the different circumstances that bring us to the stage to make us be in a position to be able to even play with Alex. All of those things are already having a certain level of control on our autonomy. And so it actually is setting up the boundaries for us to even engage to the point that when we get to the actual selecting of responses and sitting to the actor, Alex has already coerced or set up conditions for us to play within that we're not able to escape from. And so the operator is actually being operated on. The operator serves data to the operator, which is Alex, and it executes those operations. And so if we let go of an anthropocentric focus on Alex or on ourselves as being served by Alex, it gives us an opportunity to begin to kind of consider what is possible from a robot's perspective. And so the question is, can a robot be an equal stage partner with humans? So that's a question.
Yes, that's right. A subtopic.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that the only way to make it an equal stage partner is to play the game. But that's already the premise of improv. We are already in a land where we make up universes as we make scenes that follow its specific rules. It's also the premise of role-playing games. It's the premise of video games. So the only way for making Alex an equal stage partner is to explicitly endow Alex with that role. And that's actually part of the improbotics training for the actors.
So what if we do let go of our assumptions of human autonomy and shift to the sort of object-oriented ontology regarding human utility and look at it as a relational exchange with other equally valid objects like Alex? Does it allow us to see a more reasonable answer to, for example, why the proliferation of technology in our post-digital age hasn't actually resulted in greater human autonomy or freedom or creative practice? We're actually working just as much as we ever have been. Technology is meant to be this thing, this tool that we only endow meaning with, then why has it still escaped a level of utility? And I think looking at the way we interact with Alex on stage begins to perhaps provide an answer, in that we're not trying to create a better improviser. We're creating something with an AI that we don't know what will happen next. And in the spirit of that, as you've noticed, our shows are not necessarily the most entertaining shows for an audience.
So the
Thank you. Thank you, Boy. Do you want to copy paste the review that reviewer recently wrote about us in a show that we spent months preparing? Please go ahead.
So we extracted some choice review comments from our latest show, which I think actually serves to illustrate some of these points. And I'm conscious of time, so we won't go through all of them. But this reviewer responds, so excited are the cast members about Rosetta Code, which is the name of that particular show, where a computer calls the shots that they forget to tell the audience how it all works. Goes on to say, it's difficult to work out what the role AI is playing. Presumably the point is to show how limited the technology is. The cast all seem to know what's going on or having a whale of a time. But it's a pleasure that this reviewer decided was one-sided.
So,
and so,
please.
So while on one level we can look at this as, oh, where's if we're not entertaining, what are we doing? I think we can also look at this as an interesting reality of a shifting in perspective about the role of the human on stage, and that the presence of the robot, interestingly, provokes a question of how it works. We don't ask the same question of an actor on stage. Whether we're entertained or not, we don't ask, how did the actor work? We're drawn to how well we identified with the staged action. And so I think the resistance of the reviewer actually is a positive sign for the possibility of changing a different relationship that's uncomfortable for many, which is, the destabilizing of the human as, the center of the universe. And I think what the stage offers us as a different solution to normal technology is a creative space to play with this emergent property. And that role of entertainment is that of delight. And that delight will only happen to the degree that our audiences can come along with us on that journey, but it's going to be an uncomfortable journey along the way.
We fed some of the questions to Alex itself, and it came up with additional questions to follow up. But for the sake of time, we will close our dialogue here and let the room to Iana. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this presentation of this really interesting work. Is there one urgent, immediate question? So because we are a little bit late, maybe we could go on for the next talk. And if there's one question you can ask after the next paper. Is it okay for everybody? Okay, perfect. And so then we will come to our second speaker, Irene Alcubilla Troughton, PhD candidate from Utrecht University, who is working on a project Acting Like a Robot, and who will present us now her paper Rule-Based Improvisation for Developing Social Robots, the Value of Limits and Emergence in Human-Robotic Interaction. Please.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm gonna try to share my screen now. My presentation is not as technically complicated as the previous one, I'm afraid. And I'm trying to not get too relaxed with how much time we have and try to keep it to the 15 minutes that I supposedly prepared. So this is my talk. I'm gonna try to talk about one case study that we just started in the project of which I'm part of. So first I want to give some general context about what I'm working on and what my project is about. So the project, as it has been said, is Acting Like a Robot. And in that we try to see what kind of methods from the theater and the performing arts in general, also dance, how they can be used to program robots and human-robot interaction differently. So we try to move away from the premise that robotics, social robotics specifically, they have to resemble humans in order to connect with us. And we try to see what kind of modes of acting and behaving are more appropriate for the robot's affordances and materiality, hence this idea of acting like a robot. What would that mean? And how can we still create this connection with the human being? So in this particular project, we collaborate with a university in Amsterdam, the Vrije Universiteit. And there we try to explore specifically what kind of dance techniques we could use to make this happen. And we hypothesize that rule-based improvisation techniques in dance can be very useful to do this. So the general idea is that we think that human-robot social interactions can be understood as an improvisation. And by improvisation, we mean this idea of real-time decision in a semi-structured environment. But also, as we all can know, social interactions are in social interactions, we need to abide to rules, but these rules are kind of flexible, sometimes they're broken. So in a way, we approach them in a kind of with a playful character to it, so to speak. And we think that certain dance rule-based improvisation techniques work with this idea as well, and can create, first of all, a structure that we can program into the robot, but also enough room for an emergent behavior to happen that could maybe be directed more by the robot's needs rather than the imitation of what a human would do in this specific scenarios. So I'm gonna just give like a brief, very brief history of improvisation. So improvisation was part of the arts since the 18th century, but it was not really a predominant practice until the 20th century, especially in the 60s due to groups such as Justin Church Theatre and Grand Union. And it's usually being considered to be in opposition to choreography in dance, but also to the staging of dramatic plays in text-based theater. So there was this kind of binary between choreography and text-based theater as a scripted behavior, and then improvisation as unscripted. And this binary has been challenged in contemporary discourses, but still is very much foregrounded this idea of improvisation being having these extemporaneous qualities of being done in the moment. And this is usually associated with the idea of absence of rules and prescriptions controlling behavior. But there is a type of improvisation that happens, especially during the second half of the 20th century, that really try to foreground the value of rules and limits within improvisation in itself, and how that helps to actually create improvisation rather than constrain it. So in this practices, improvisation is more understood as the practice of making choices in the moment and according to a set of rules. But what we think is very interesting is that these rules are not specifically goal-oriented. So you don't specifically want to express one idea or convey one particular message or achieve one particular pose, but it's more of a more general, more abstracted set of rules from which something else can happen, something else can emerge. And in the case of human improvisers, of course, these choices are always made by humans. There's always some sort of conscious decision happening there. But there are several approaches to rule-based improvisation that kind of lean into this idea of automation. And one of them is the one that we try to explore with this case study, which is William Forsyth's improvisation technologies. So we also think that this can be used in human-robot social interactions, but that also maybe can bring forward the practice of improvisation in itself within the arts, because it takes this idea of automation maybe a bit further. But I'm going to focus just on the first thing for the sake of time, so how it can help in human-robot interaction. So improvisation has been used in social robotic projects, as we also have seen from the previous talk. And I try to make some sort of categorization of in which way improvisation has been used in robotics so far. And what I realized is that sometimes it's used as a method and sometimes it's used as a goal. So the projects in which improvisation is used as a method is more about developing robotic motion and behavior through improvisational techniques in the process of deploying this movement. But then in the actual human-robot interaction, that tends to be choreographed or teleoperated. So improvisation from the part of the robot doesn't happen anymore. And improvisation is just a means to achieve a specific type of behavior, a specific type of response. But then there are other projects which are a bit more limited. There are not so many of them in which they really focus on trying to make the robot improvise. And our project would be more in this second category. But there's also two other distinctions that I think can be made. The first one is this distinction between projects that are more goal-oriented and more emergent. And this is not a strict binary, it's more of a gradient, but I think that for the sake of clarity, it's good to make these two distinctions. And the second one is between an internal and an external perspective of improvisation that requires a bit more of explanation, but I'll get to it. So in goal-oriented approaches to improvisation, improvising is a means to work towards the goal of something, the goal of expressing a particular intention, conveying a particular message, evoking a particular response. And improvisation is used just as a means to achieve this goal. And it usually plays with human models of doing these things, reproducing the way in which humans would try to achieve this goal. And on the other hand, there are projects that do not specifically work towards an end, but use improvisation in a more playful way to see what kind of possibilities there can be for movement or behavior within these particular techniques. Most of the projects that use improvisation, I realized that were more goal-oriented, and they were usually in combination with this idea of improvisation from an internal perspective. And what I mean with this is that they understand improvisation as based on the existence and later on expression of internal states. So drives, emotions, obstacles that can be within a particular character. And this implies, in my view, an understanding of improvisation as something that happens in an autonomous sentient individual who's moved by internal states that later on and independent from is expressed in movement. I think this carries a lot of unspoken assumptions about what humans are, but also about what improvisation is in itself. I don't have a lot of time to get into that. But there are also other types of projects in which the idea of Improvisation is located in the somatic and embodied knowledge of the dancers or the actors, and that's the thing that allows them to act and to move forward with this improvisation techniques, which is different from the previous one, but it still kind of relies on improvisation being something that's internal to the human being. So in this case, a human being is essential in order to create these improvisation techniques, in order to discover something and then implement it in the robot or teleoperate the robot using this knowledge. External perspectives on improvisation, on the other hand, do not really approach improvisation from the perspective of the expression of inner states, but they work with a set of rules that direct behavior and movement choices. And this external perspective has been rarely explored in robotics, and usually it's still connected to goal-oriented approaches or with human models of doing things. So what we hypothesize is that this connection between the external and the emergent kind of approach could be very useful in robotics and could try to create a set of rules that are programmable, but that still leave room for the robot to act in its own way without predetermined poses, ideas, or goals that needs to achieve that usually rely on human models. So one of the techniques that we're exploring at the moment are William Forsythe improvisation technologies. So William Forsythe is an American dancer and choreographer that combines his previous knowledge and training in classical ballet with insights from the visual arts and computer technologies. And he created in 1994 the improvisation technologies, a tool for the analytical eye. And that's a CD-ROM with 60 video chapters in which he demonstrates this technique. And it was meant to be given to the people that work with him in his ballet company. So what he does is to analyze classical dance movements from the perspective of geometrical shapes and points, as you can see in these images, and also by means of folding and unfolding mechanisms of the body in a way that they can distort these initial poses, these initial movements, and create something different. It's a tool for analyzing movement, but also for creating new movement and for interacting with the environment and with others. And it's not so much that these geometrical shapes describe what the movements do, more in the sense of Rudolf Laban, maybe. But what he does is to ask the dancers and the actors to inscribe, to write this kind of shapes and let that direct the movement. It's also very interested not in achieving an end point, but all to have an initial, he always talks about the starting point. What's important is the starting point. It's what you start doing, but then you just you render yourself to this particular rule, to this particular movement, to this particular shape, and something else will come. So in his technique, it's very important to be aware of these motion traces, to imagine them, to follow them, and to develop this new set of movements and this new set of interactions depending on this geometrical and mathematical structures. The basic one that he has is a point-to-point line in which two parts of the body can connect, creating this line, and then several other techniques like following the line or dropping the line can happen in order for your body to move. So with Forsythe technology, we think that two things can be useful for robotics. The first one is for a generation of robotic motion. So rather than implementing human-inspired motions, we think that this technique could create a more varied and creative set of motions that could explore actually the robot's materiality, the robot's affordances, the robot's possibilities, without having to specifically replicate a pose or trying to achieve a specific goal in terms of movement. And this can be easily programmable because these rules are, the fact that these rules are very mathematical and geometrical is something that can happen within robotic platforms. And also there are several layers of difficulty. So we can always start from something very simple and try to explore what kind of interactions this could bring forward, and then add in more layers of complexity. And secondly, in the interaction in themselves with humans. So Forsythe Analytical tools are meant for you to analyze your own movement and react to it, but also to react to the environment and to analyze emotion in other person, other dancer, and react to it with the same geometrical rules. And also some of the techniques are specifically focused on this reaction to the environment, such as room writing, in which a dancer needs to interact with objects around them in base of their geometrical shape. So to summarize what we think could be useful in this is the fact that it offers a framework of rules that are computable and can be applicable to dance and on stage generally for artists to work with this kind of platforms, but also in social interactions, because at the end of the day, a social interaction is a set of rules that you need to work with. So we would try to make something that can be changed depending on the circumstances, that can be adapted by people to use in several situations, but they'll work on a particular framework in which the robot can move and can create this emergent behavior. Second, the fact that it's based on simple and abstract rules that do not determine the way in which these things can be enacted, but offers a framework from which this behavior can emerge. And we would like to explore this in terms of inverse kinematics or cost functions to try to see what the robot would come up with within this particular framework, and how easy or difficult or far away or close is for us to be able to connect with this robotic way of doing things. Then it's also based on spatial and geometrical commands, which permits a higher reactivity and to be more connected to the situation in which the robot is moving. And it deals with nonverbal communication, which we think is a very rich but underdeveloped side of social robotics, and that could be very useful to try to advance this kind of human-robot interaction in this realm. So I'll just try to make some general conclusion of this. The proposition is then that we would like to explore these external and emergent approaches to rule-based improvisation as an alternative way of dealing with social interaction between a human and a robot. And we think that this improvisational techniques can help to explore the possibilities and the affordances of robot movement beyond human imitation, but they can also help in finding novel motions, novel ways of interaction with humans in a way that is emergent within a particular framework of rules, that is more creative, that is more spontaneous, and that is also more flexible, and that allows the robot to interact with humans, but also to be in contact with its environment. But of course, this is the beginning. It sounds very, very big. So this is the initial idea that we have with this project, what we think could be interesting. And we're going to start to work on it in the next few months. So we'll see what actually is possible and what kind of surprises the robot give us in these frameworks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irene, for this very interesting talk. So we still have a couple of minutes. So if you have any question for one of the two papers, please go on.
I have a question for Irene for the last of our talk. Just a little remark with the improvisation technologies. There was also a relation with Robert Wilson's inspiring sketches, where he designed actually storyboards for theater, scenography, and also cues, which was inspiring actually the production of improvisation technologies. Just to give it a little remark, but I would like to know how you would like to take these geometric rules into action then in improvisation. How is it a purely like movement-based interaction, or also goes like the talk before about principles of talking or interaction by words?
Well, we're thinking of non-verbal interaction because of the particular technology that we're using at the moment, but also because we think that in this kind of dialogue and speech base it's a bit more difficult to try to work with robotic ways of doing things, and what kind of new connections we can establish with a particular robotic platform if we go immediately to symbolic language. that becomes very much human-centered. It's a bit more difficult to try to see what other types of connection we can achieve. And the fact that this is such a rich technology in ways of moving and ways of connecting in movement, we think that focusing only on nonverbal interaction could be more beneficial.
Can I just follow another question to Boyd, and about the idea of using the improvisation actually is in chatbots also very much important, how you feed the system. So how you actually prompt GPT-3. So how did you, or Piotr, how did you actually made it that the robot was actually reacting in a certain comedian way? So you can feed actually also this kind of idea of comedy, or maybe just with sentiment analysis, or how do you really make this robot like funny? You know?
We're still trying to figure that out. Yeah.
I think we are following a precept of, I mean, so one of the possible precepts of improv, which is not try to be funny and let the comedy emerge from the situation. Of course, it's very easy for me to say that because we just have no idea how to make it funny, as you said, Boyd. There are people who work in computational humor, like Thomas Winters at the University of Leuven in Belgium. But we just do not know how to codify the idea of being funny. So the humor emerges from the interaction.
I think an interesting.
And the humor. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was going to say, you know, we've been looking at different ways of feeding in particular kinds of you know, data that might influence it one way or another. But I think, as Piotr said, the humor actually tends to come out of just the madness, the attempt to try to understand each other. And I think this also happens with humans. If you go to a lot of improv, you know, the humor itself is often hit or miss. Like what, you know, how often it's going to be funny is really dependent on how well everyone is listening and engaging. And I think what Alex gives us, whether it's non sequiturs or something that's really connected, it's an opportunity to make those big leaps, to make sense of things that are senseless. And I think that's where the humor itself comes from. So rather than programming jokes, I think the humor will continue to actually be better developed the more we find ways to make sense of the things that do make sense with our reality, the things that don't.
I just wanted to correct a little bit and add to what we said. GPT-3, in virtue of its very large data set, is actually capable of zero shot or one shot learning on the fly. So if you prompt it with examples of jokes, and so let's say setup and response, and you have a few such setups, and you add a new setup, it may come up with a joke, most likely fetched from the data set or some similarities with existing jokes. So the best thing you can do with in joke generation is to essentially retrieve similar sounding jokes based on a context. But we don't do that in our show.
Thank you. There's a question from Gunter, please.
Yes, actually I have two questions, one to Piotr and Boyd. That would be, I kind of lost you where you said that, talked about the role of the operator, the human operator. And I think machines are very good at posing options, but they're not so good at selecting the one option. So it's the problem of the last mile, I call it. And did you say that you kind of have a solution for that, Boyd, or did you not say that?
Not a solution as such, but more of I guess, a reframing of whether that's a problem or not. You know, we ascribe intelligence to the robot to the degree that it does the things that are essentially human, but the things that it doesn't, that it does that are not human, are actually what I think is sort of the interesting thing about having a robot on stage. And so that last mile, like you say, is definitely, as you know, at this point, essential for the human to jump in. But it's in examining the relationship of the human curator with the already curated options that I think can be explored more deeply and more meaningfully on stage. And so I think it's, on one hand, we're going to continue to work to try to make better models that can do these things, but it's also important to look at some of the, I guess, invisible things that Alex in this case is doing that might be interesting to put on stage as well, that we often would think to maybe hide. So in this case, does the audience see all the variable options that could be selected? Do we just show what we have selected? And I think there we start to broaden the experience of the stage for the audience.
Thank you. I have one more question, if I may. That would be to Irene, and to the question of the Laban qualities. Do you think there is something like, or there could be something like a automatic Laban quality detection in computers? Do you think that's possible?
Well, there are a lot of robotic projects that work with Laban, especially with the effort quality of Laban, and that try precisely to automate this kind of qualities. It's it's something that I find very tricky. And that's something that we decided by selecting this kind of techniques precisely that do not work so much on effort and qualities of movement, but rather on more the ways of moving based on this kind of geometrical commands, a bit more interesting to explore at first, rather than go directly into effort qualities, because at the end of the day, Laban was also a very anthropocentric system that was based on a particular type of, a very particular type of history, also coming from ballet, with all of the assumptions that are about the body and the human body within ballet. And I think that just taking one part, and Laban is extremely complex, all of his theories and everything that he developed, and taking just effort qualities and then just transposing it into a robotic platform, I'm not so sure that's entirely the way to go, or that we should just uncritically just transpose it and translate it. So that's one of the reasons why I didn't specifically go into Laban, and I thought that maybe it would be more useful to do a step backwards and to try to use this more geometrical ways of moving to explore what kind of things are possible from the robot, what kind of things can happen, how can we interpret them, how can we connect to them, and then from there trying to move into more qualities of movement, which I also think are very interesting and very essential for the way in which we understand nonverbal communication.
Thank you. We have a question of Chris Ziegler, please.
You're muted, Chris.
Chris,
sorry,
okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. I mean, I worked with Foresight in the 90s on the improvisation technologies, and also where we were actually witnessing how movement generation was done. And I would say that the improvisation technologies was mostly done as a modifier of movement, but the generation actually, that's why I was asking about language, because I would say just consider the idea use of words and also imaginative images in dance generation is very important. It was especially in Foresight, and the improvisation technologies was made for communicating a modified general cue set of movement generators. So it's a modifying tool. And I think this would be crucial also for an interaction, that certain code words maybe are connected and there's a storyline somehow, which is also possible to use language in it. And then the geometric modifiers can be done as a dialogue of changing the rules maybe on the fly. But it's just a kind of an idea I had listening to your interesting presentation, using the improvisation technologies for a dialogue with robotic systems. Just one little question for Boyd and Piotr. Why did you use this little robot? Was it necessary for your dramaturgy? Why was it necessary? Because the voice was so dominant.
So that's a good question. We kind of rushed through one of the slides. So Alex actually exists in multiple forms. So we have a little robot that is sometimes on stage. We also have an avatar that we've been using for our online shows that we physically puppet, and we also have this embodied voice. So we kind of explore all of them depending on the show that we're doing.
When we started using the robot in late 2016 in a pub, one audience member, an improviser, said, "Oh my God, Alex now is a little cute robot." That's it. That was basically the reason why we did that.
That's a very good reason.
Okay, thank you. Boyd, do you want to say something else before? Yeah.
If there's time, I was going to ask Irene if they're exploring different kinds of physicality, like the physical manifestation of the robot. Is there a particular robot that you're working to program, or are you looking to program different styles of robot? Are they anthropocentric or articulating arms, or what kind of things?
Yeah. So this is my answer is very practical. So we are going to try it now with the robots that we have available. And of course, these are, as you know, now Pepper and this kind of robots. We would like it to make it adaptable to other platforms as well, and to also try to see what kind of differences you can explore by this different physicalities of the robots. And I also, I know we don't have a lot of time, but I also wanted to respond briefly to what Chris said. I think that's very interesting, this idea of using Foresight as a modifying tool and to use it on pre-existing languages. As I understood it, also, as I would like to see it in Foresight, there is, of course, this idea of transformation and modification, but also this idea of creation. That for me, it's very interesting because it doesn't bring up the problematic of what kind of data sets you use in order to modify this. And in the case of movement, poses, and all of this kind of things that are part of nonverbal communication, it always comes to the fact of, okay, we just imbue human poses into the robot, and then we create this kind of modifications, which can be interesting, of course. But from my perspective, it's a bit more interesting to try to see, okay, from the beginning of this, if we do a step back and we start from the creation of this movement, is there a type of robotic movement that can emerge from particular set of rules?
Actually, you have to know that actually I was witnessing at the time when he was trying to actually break the classical movement connotation repertoire. So he actually, his preset movement, that was classical.
Yeah, of course.
He invented that to break it, to modify it. And that's exactly the key you can have for robotic interaction. Because robots also have maybe certain mechanical key movements they can't avoid because they have joints, they have mechanical bodies, and you can create that set and then modify it with this.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I think it's time because the forum will start in 5 minutes. So thanks again for our speakers, and everybody is invited to join the forum in 5 minutes to continue the discussion with the other two panels. Especially the speakers are invited as well, because I have to give a short summary, but you are the specialists, so if you would complete what I'm going to say, it would be great.
Thank you, everyone. I have to go teach, so Piotr will handle representing team at robotics.
That's perfect. Okay, so thanks again, Boyd and Irene, Piotr, for the interesting discussion. And see you in the forum in 5 minutes.